It's a big day for the Women Taking the Lead podcast, and it's not just because we're ringing in 2024. This is the 500th episode of Women Taking the Lead. Thank you for listening, for cheering me on, and telling your friends about the podcast. The first few episodes of Women Taking the Lead were released on March 25th of 2015. And doing the math, this podcast will be 9 years old in just a few months. And it has been quite a journey. In the beginning, I was releasing 2 episodes a week, and my episodes were primarily interviews with women entrepreneurs. I asked them to share several pivotal moments in their development, and many of them referred back to their former full-time jobs. And after a year or so, I started weaving in an episode here and there that was more of an audio blog or topical episode. I got great feedback from that and started doing them more and more. And then I did something that was at the time, and I think it was even like a few years after I started the podcast. And it took that long because it was something that was really scary for me to do. I started recording and releasing what we call, in air quotes, on-air coaching episodes. On-air is actually a misnomer because these are pre-recorded episodes, but that didn't matter because it still had that feel of someone pointing a camera at you and saying, do something impressive. When you're kind of put on the spot to just perform. And these coaching calls felt like a lot of pressure at first, but I settled into them and truly began to enjoy these conversations. In fact, later in this episode, I'm going to give you a list of the top 20 most downloaded episodes in a bit, and 5 of them are coaching episodes. So that tells me you enjoy these episodes as well. If you've been listening to the podcast for 5 years or more, you've been there with me through my mom's breast cancer diagnosis in 2018, and she's doing great, by the way. And if you started listening in the last 9 months or more, you were there when my dad passed away from lung cancer. I've had shifts in my geography. I started my podcast in Maine, and I'm now in Virginia. I've also had shifts in my business. The Women Taking the Lead podcast turned out to be a rebranding of my entire business. Before launching the podcast, I was coaching small business owners around their leadership, both men and women. And I wanted to be focusing more on the unique needs of women leaders, but couldn't seem to pivot my business in that direction. So the podcast was intended to be an outlet for all that energy I had building up. Within a year of launching the podcast, it was clear I could make that pivot. The next pivot came after a break I took in 2021. I spoke about this on the podcast, and the before and after of that experience is actually in the top 2 most downloaded episodes. During the pandemic, it became clear I was holding back my potential and the potential of my business by trying to focus simultaneously on women business owners and women leaders within organizations. That dual focus caused my message to get watered down and unclear, and the proof of that was in the results I was getting. I had to choose between the two, and after some reflecting and coaching, I concluded my focus needed to be on women leaders within organizations. But then it didn't stop there. Because I've known something, and for some time, having coached women within organizations long before I even started the podcast, what I know is that it's always beneficial to give any leader the training, mentoring, coaching, and experiential learning opportunities that you can give them. However, organizations will not achieve gender parity by focusing all of the change on women leaders. If companies are not examining hiring practices, employee benefits, performance programs, succession planning, etc., women will be hired and promoted, but turnover will keep the company from achieving gender parity sustainably. That is why you may have noticed the welcoming introduction at the beginning of each episode has morphed over time. My services have expanded and the introduction reflects that. Now, a little disclaimer before I get into the most popular episodes. The industry standards for what constitutes a download have changed dramatically, and now I can't see any of the stats around the downloads that occurred before July 14th of 2019. Even if I could, the information will not be accurate or in alignment with what the standards are today, right? It would be comparing apples and oranges. However, even with the 2019 as the cutoff date, only one episode in 2021 made the cut. All the rest are from 2022 and 2023, which is wild. That in and of itself is interesting feedback because it was in February of 2022 that I pivoted to focus on women leaders within organizations. Now, probably because I'm very passionate about that topic, and a lot of the episodes really focused in on women who were within organizations developing their leadership. And I believe because of that, I gained more listeners because all of you were sharing these episodes with friends and colleagues. So thank you for that. The episode from 2021, it was the last episode I released before coming back in February of 2022, which means it likely got so many downloads because it was the episode that was at the top of the list whenever somebody found the podcast between, I think it was May of 2021 and February of 2022. Most people listen to the first episode of a podcast to check it out, to see if it's worth going into the back catalog to listen more. However, it got so many downloads. I can't just chalk it up to the random listens that happen because somebody's just checking to see if the podcast is worth subscribing to or following. All that to say, the last 2 years have been the most popular years for my podcast, and I thank you for being here and listening each week. Okay, rolling into the top 20 podcasts of women taking the lead. If you're new to the podcast, there will likely be an episode that catches your attention. Or even if you've listened to all the episodes, there may be one or two you want to revisit because you're in a different place than you were the first time you listened. To make them easy to find, all these episodes are linked in the episode description, and I'll also state the date the episode was released. So just to make it easy, if you hear one that you think, oh, I want to listen to that or go back and listen again, you can find them. Okay, they're in order of the most downloaded. So number one, most downloaded episode was the 2 reasons you got tripped up after you started your new role. That episode was released on Valentine's Day in 2022. So February 14th, 2022. This episode was the comeback episode. I went over the new focus of the podcast and dove into 2 things that can challenge you when you take on a new role. Those are shifting your identity to being the leader needed for that role and rethinking how you provide value to your team and your organization. The next one was 100% Jody, Taking Time to Process. That was released on May 24th, 2021. This was the episode I announced that I was going to take some time to process everything that had happened during the pandemic. And there had been some major changes in my business, and I was definitely feeling like it was time to pause and think through how I wanted to move forward. And it paid off. I highly recommend that if ever you can pause something going on in your life, maybe something that isn't giving you the same energy boost or charge that it used to, do it. If it's meant to be, you will come back to it. And I did. I did and went on to be here at episode 500. Okay, the next most popular episode was 2 soft skills, and soft is in air quotes, 2 soft skills that exponentially up-level your leadership. That came out May 30th of 2022. So directing your full attention and listening deeply. I break down how these 2 soft skills, in reality, they're now called power skills because they are powerful, help you to develop more trust, stronger relationships, buy-in, and commitment. They are also fundamental skills to develop executive presence, right? So can you see why the soft skills is a misnomer and they're now called power skills? Crucial. Okay, next one was a coaching call. You are the leader to develop other leaders. In this coaching call with a member of this community, we get to the heart of what can trip you up after a promotion. In this real world example, I'm offering some tips and perspectives and a book recommendation to help make this transition easier. So really wild that in February, I came back with an episode talking about the 2 things that are crucial for you to shift in order to adapt to your new role. And before I knew it, I had somebody who had applied to be on an on-air coaching call, and they were talking about exactly that, or they weren't necessarily talking about it, but that was the solution to the challenges that they were facing. Okay, next up is how to set explicitly clear expectations to prevent disappointment. Is everyone clear on what your expectations are? And are you clear on what others are expecting from you? Are you sure about that? This episode breaks down how to get better at creating and honing clear expectations. The next episode is another coaching call. Are they really judging you? This coaching call explores who is really judging you. Is it them or is it you? We are dismantling the unrealistic expectations you may have for yourself. Oh, and that episode came out in August 8th of 2022. The next one is titled Facing Conflict Head On. It came out August 1st of 2022. And I think the title is pretty clear and on the nose. This episode covers facing conflict, how to address and mitigate it, and when to look to other professionals to step in. And in sum, it really makes the case for why conflict is a very normal thing. It's a natural thing, right? If you're a human being interacting with other human beings, there is going to be conflict. So there's no point in avoiding it. And actually, the sooner you face it and handle it, the better. But this also gives you some tips and practices for handling conflict well. The next most popular episode was Infuse Your Leadership with Bold Requests. This episode covers how to bring some boldness to your leadership and make bold requests if this is something you may shy away from. Because the reality is, being bold is more in alignment with who you are than you might think right now. So worth checking out. Next, how to hold others accountable to lead effectively. This came out July 11th of 2022. There's nothing like the word accountability to divide a person or a room. My experience is we have funny notions of what it means to be accountable or to practice accountability. If you have any hesitancy around accountability, this episode will change that because accountability is one of the pillars of a functioning team, right? So important topic. The next episode was Carla Miller on creating influence, and that came out September 19th of 2022. In this episode, I'm joined by Carla Miller, who is an expert on the influence gap, to talk about how you can gain more influence so you can make a big or a bigger impact at work. The next most downloaded episode is how to make staying organized easy to do. And that came out a week later, September 26th of 2022. While being organized and staying organized sounds great, it's not always easy to do, especially if being organized is not your default. However, Having a system in place will make it so much easier to sustain, and it'll make you look good in the process. All right, next we have a model for you to process change and emotions. That came out October 10th of 2022. In this episode, I'm joined by Joy Stickle, the Executive Director of Talent Management and Development for Sumitomo Pharma. Joy is walking us through the emotional change curve, what it looks like at work, and how you as a leader can use this information to help guide your team and colleagues through each change. This is relevant at any time because the reality is change is coming more quickly, right? The world is changing quite fast. I can't even articulate it right now because even thinking about it makes my brain go numb. So having an understanding of the emotional change curve will be helpful to you, your families, and your team and organization. That's a fantastic episode. The next most popular episode is another coaching call. How to turn being the bearer of bad news into a coaching opportunity. And that came out May 23rd of 2022. And in this coaching call, we're diving into giving a team member critical feedback. While these conversations may not always be enjoyable, they are opportunities for growth and development for us and our team. And the more comfortable you get with these conversations and preparing for them, they actually can be enjoyable. Try it out. Give it a try before you naysay that, because I think you'll be surprised. Give it a few months. Then we have another coaching call. Do you need to name the priority? This one came out August 29th of 2022. In this coaching episode, we're diving into the experience of being pulled in too many directions. We're breaking down the tasks, looking at the resources that are available, and naming what needs priority attention. So if that's your experience, you definitely want to listen to this one. And then we have another coaching call, constructively dealing with unconscious bias. This came out July 18th of 2022. This coaching episode was, in my opinion, a powerful one. Being the recipient of unconscious bias can be a galling experience, but what's the best way to deal with it? In this coaching episode, we explore how to address unconscious bias when it occurs so that you get the result that you're looking for. Okay, next is how to show your team your appreciation, especially if it doesn't come naturally to you. This came out May 16th of 2022. This episode explores why consistently taking a genuine interest in those around you is so important and how to do it effectively. Because whether you know it or not, your people don't all like to be appreciated in the same way. And appreciation is recognition. We are looking for those things. We want to be seen and we want to feel like we belong. So this, again, is a vital skill for you to develop as a leader. The next most downloaded episode is how to ask your company to sponsor you to be coached. This came out March 7th of 2022. Have you been wanting to develop your leadership skills, but know you need more than self-paced or classroom training? Your company may have a learning and development budget that could be used for you to work with a coach. This episode guides you through exploring your options and some things to prepare ahead of making your request. The next most downloaded episode is Avoid Being a Bargain Deal by Knowing When to Negotiate. That came out October 31st of 2022. And in this episode, I've got Anna Papalia joining me to discuss negotiating for salary and benefits. She underscores that a successful negotiation has more to do with when you negotiate rather than how you negotiate. If you are gearing up for a negotiation now or in the future, be sure to listen to this episode. Okay, I've got 2 more left. The next one is Unlock Your Mindset and Reveal Your Genius. This came out March 1st of 2023. Any expert on success will tell you mindset determines what an individual will be capable of achieving, right? There's a correlation between your growth mindset or positive mindset and what you are able to achieve. But how do you measure it? How do you measure mindset? I've got Stacey Hartman, an expert on unleashing creative and intuitive genius, to talk about a tool she and I both use with our clients to measure mindset and uncover untapped potential. And the last one, but last but not least, it's the 20th most downloaded episode out of 500, right? So keeping that in perspective, that episode is How to Keep Motivated and Moving Forward. This was released October 24th of 2022. Oof. While this episode is the 20th most downloaded episode of Women Taking the Lead, I think I would listen or re-listen to this one first. This episode lists the common strategies that work for most people to consistently help you stay motivated. Sneak peek. This list starts with checking in with yourself and make sure you're taking breaks. And as we have just completed year end and are celebrating ringing in the new year, we want to make sure we're staying high energy, we're staying motivated. Not all the time, right? We take breaks, but there's also tips in here for how to sustain your energy so you're not getting tapped out, or how to break things down so they don't feel overwhelming. So, okay, not an exhaustive list, but a good list. Like, these are great episodes if you want to find them, listen, or re-listen to them. And before I say goodbye, can I ask a favor? Can you join in the celebration and help me to expand the reach of Women Taking the Lead, to help more leaders hone their skills so they can advance in their career and still enjoy their sanity and a personal life? You can choose from any one of the gifts that I'm going to name to bestow. So the first one is, if you haven't already, leave a rating and a review in your preferred podcast app. That makes it easier for people to find the podcast when they're searching. It kind of brings them up in the search listings. The second gift that you can bestow is to share this podcast directly with a friend, a family member, or colleague, especially a specific episode you believe they would find valuable. The third would be to, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast in your preferred podcast app. And I'll leave links in the comments on social media and in the show notes of where you can find me in your favorite podcast app. The fourth would be to post about the show on social media. Find an episode you really enjoy and tell people why you liked it. And, if you do so, tag me so I can like and comment. I'm at Jody Flynn on LinkedIn and at Jody M. Flynn, M as in Mary, at Jody M. Flynn on Instagram. The fifth is, if you find a post on social media, give it a love, leave a comment, share it to, again, expand that reach. And the last one is to do some other great thing to help me reach more women that maybe I haven't thought of to ask. Whatever it is for you, whatever inspires you. And thank you so much for your generosity and your support. I hope these 500 episodes are of value to you, and here's to your success. Happy New Year.